right, this next one's going to be a little more complicated, but we're going to make it work. So it says the average height, h in centimeters, of a certain type of grain can be modeled by the function h of r equals 0.24 r squared minus 1.28 r plus 3.36, where r is the distance in centimeters between the rows in which the grain is planted. Based on this model, what's the minimum average height of the grain, and what is the row spacing that results in that height? So, looking at this, again, identifying our A, B, and C, we've got A equals 0.024. That's pretty darn small. We have our B value is negative 1.28, and our C value is 33.6. So that 0.024 means it's a positive A value, which means it's opening upward, which means we have a minimum. Which makes sense because the question kind of asks for the minimum average height. So going through the same process, let's start finding the axis of symmetry. So we got x equals negative b over 2 times a. We got negative 1.28 divided by 2 times 0.024. Cleaning that up a little bit, so we got a double negative there, so it's going to be positive 1.28 over 2 times 0.024 is 0.048. Now, you could go through, if you want to see the more complicated way of doing this by hand, you can go through and look at the answer key that I have posted, and you'll see that it's got like a lot of details about how to multiply both sides by 1,000. I'm okay with us just jumping into it. It becomes 28.6 repeated, or 28 and 2/3. So that's our x value. So we got to find our y value. Now, I also just realized I mislabeled something because we're not using x here. Looking back at the original function, we're not using x, but instead we're using r. So maybe I should go back and change this to r equals. Really, it's just the independent variable. It doesn't really make a huge difference what the value is, or sorry, what the variable is, as long as we're consistent. And I'm trying to be consistent here. So our x value, we got 28 and 2/3. To find the output, the height, we're going to plug it in. So we're going to do h of 28 and 2/3, or 28.6 repeated. It's usually easier to just type in 0.6 repeated forever on there. So we're going to do 0.024 times 28.6, and you'll just punch in 6 repeated a bunch of times, squared, minus 1.28 times 28.6 repeated, and again, just punch 6 a bunch of times and then close the parentheses, plus 33.6. After you type all that in to your calculator, you end up with a grand total of 16.53, and then it keeps repeating for quite some time. We're going to stick with 16.53. So what does that mean in the context of this? So this 28.23, we decided that was our R, not decided, we discovered that was our R. The 16.53, that's our H. So R stands for the distance in centimeters between the rows. So we can say when the rows are spaced 28 and 2/3 centimeters apart, the grain has its minimum height. That's fine. It's got its minimum height of 16.53 centimeters. So sometimes we got to put things back into context. Let me shift this around a little bit so we can see a little bit better. Sometimes you got to put it back into context. So far this year we've done a lot of like just calculations. Here are the numbers. Now we're putting it back into context.